Elizabeth Parker, often called Liz, stood in the gleaming kitchen of her spacious suburban New York home, where she and her husband, Richard Parker, Rick, along with their 2 children, had lived happily for the past 12 years. While Liz prepared breakfast, she listened to the cheerful laughter of their children, Ethan and Sophia, coming from the living room. These were the moments she cherished most. The family gathered together, everything seemingly perfect. Rick entered the kitchen, looking dapper in his neatly tailored gray suit. He was a successful executive at a major tech corporation and, in the eyes of Liz's friends, the ideal husband. Rick smiled at his wife, but there was a hint of distance in his eyes that Liz didn't notice. "Breakfast is ready. Do you want to take the kids to school today?" Liz asked gently. Rick glanced at his watch, his brow slightly furrowing. "I have an early meeting at the office. I'll probably head out right after breakfast." Liz nodded, accustomed to her husband's busy schedule. He was a hard-working man, always striving to give their family the best life possible. She never complained about his late nights or sudden business trips. However, recently, Liz had felt that something wasn't quite right, a vague feeling she couldn't explain. As Rick drove away, Liz stood by the window, watching until he disappeared from view. "I'm just imagining things," she told herself, trying to dismiss the doubts lingering in her heart. In the weeks that followed, Rick's schedule grew increasingly packed. He often came home late or sometimes claimed he needed to work overnight at the office. Liz began to notice small but unmistakable changes. He no longer asked her about her day as he used to, and his morning hugs had become rushed. One evening, while Liz was preparing dinner, Rick called to say he would be late because he had to attend a party with some business partners. Liz laughed over the phone, trying to sound casual, but a hint of unease stirred within her. She started paying closer attention to Rick's behavior. One day, while tidying up their bedroom, she accidentally came across a receipt from a high-end restaurant in Manhattan. What surprised her most was that the date on the receipt matched a night when Rick had said he was working late at the office. Liz discreetly checked Rick's phone while he was in the shower but found nothing suspicious. Only a few work emails. Still, her intuition told her that something was amiss. Another night, Liz woke up at 2 a.m. to find Rick texting on his phone. He jumped when he saw her, quickly putting the phone down and saying it was just an email from an overseas client. At Rick's office, a new face had joined the team, Amanda Collins, a young, beautiful, and ambitious woman, freshly graduated from a prestigious university. Amanda was highly regarded for her intelligence and striking confidence. Amanda wasn't just impressive in her abilities, but also captivating with her golden blonde hair and sharp, dazzling smile. From her first days at the office, she took notice of Rick, a mature, successful man exuding the charm of a powerful leader. During a meeting, Amanda deliberately chose a seat close to Rick, frequently offering sharp insights to draw his attention. When the meeting ended, she lingered to ask more questions about the project and invited Rick to a small party she was hosting to celebrate her team's success. At first, Rick hesitated, but Amanda's enthusiasm and charisma made it hard for him to decline. He agreed to attend, unaware that this would mark the beginning of a series of mistakes. Amanda's party took place in a small but elegant restaurant. She had carefully crafted an intimate atmosphere with dim lighting and soft jazz music. When Rick arrived, he couldn't help but be impressed by Amanda's meticulous arrangements. As the party wound down, Amanda suggested Rick stay a little longer to discuss plans for an upcoming project. Thinking it was just a routine work discussion, Rick agreed. However, when they sat in a quiet corner of the restaurant, Amanda made no effort to hide her special interest in him. "You know," Amanda said, her gaze meaningful, "working with you has been such an incredible inspiration for me." Rick felt his heartbeat quicken, but he maintained his composure. "Thank you, Amanda. You're a very talented employee." The conversation stretched longer than expected, and when Rick finally left the restaurant, he didn't realize he had crossed a dangerous line. Amanda, with a fleeting smile, knew she had taken another step forward in her plan. When Rick arrived home, he found Liz fast asleep on the sofa, the light still on as she waited for him. He leaned down to place a gentle kiss on her forehead, but his heart was filled with inner conflict. Liz had no idea that Rick had just spent an intimate evening with another woman, and she still trusted him completely. The next morning, Liz woke up early to prepare breakfast as usual, but her mood was far from lighthearted. The image of Rick coming home late, his evasive eyes, and the change in how he treated her kept replaying in her mind. The breakfast table was neatly set, but Liz didn't feel like eating. She sat there, staring blankly as the food grew cold. Rick came down the stairs, adjusting his tie while glancing at his watch. "I've got an early meeting today," he said hurriedly, grabbing a piece of toast before heading out. Liz said nothing, simply nodding as her eyes followed his figure disappearing through the door. After Rick left, she poured herself a cup of coffee and decided to call Sophie, her closest friend. "Hi Liz, are you okay? You don't sound too good," Sophie asked as soon as she picked up. Liz sighed and began to share her concerns. The late nights, the strange receipts from expensive restaurants, and Rick's recent coldness. Sophie, always straightforward, didn't hesitate to give her advice. "Listen, Liz, if you feel like something's wrong, don't ignore it. Confront him, or if necessary, get someone to help you figure things out. But don't let yourself be blinded for too long." Sophie's words struck a chord with Liz. She realized she needed to take action to protect her family, or at the very least, uncover the truth. That evening, Rick came home late once again. Liz sat in the living room, holding a cup of hot tea, but her mind was in turmoil. When she heard Rick's car pull into the driveway, she quickly set the cup down and pretended to be reading a book. Rick walked in, looking exhausted. "It was such a busy day," he said, trying to muster a smile. Liz smiled faintly, but her gaze was sharper than usual. "It's okay. I understand. Your work is very important." Rick kissed her lightly on the cheek before heading to the bathroom. As soon as he left, Liz seized the moment to grab Rick's briefcase and rummage through it. She found nothing unusual, just a thick stack of documents. But when she checked the pocket of his coat, she discovered another receipt, this time from a hotel in Manhattan. Liz's heart sank. There was no longer any doubt. Rick was definitely hiding something. However, she chose not to confront him immediately. Instead, she resolved to gather more evidence. Liz contacted a private detective agency Sophie had once mentioned. A few days later, the detective handed Liz a file containing photos of Rick and Amanda leaving a restaurant together, even holding hands in a moment of clear intimacy. Liz felt as though her entire world had crumbled. Her dreams of a happy family shattered, replaced by a searing pain and growing anger. While Liz struggled with the painful truth she had uncovered, Rick remained completely oblivious. He continued his secret relationship with Amanda while maintaining the facade of a loving husband at home. Amanda, growing bolder, no longer hid her intentions of wanting to take Liz's place. One evening, Amanda texted Rick, "Have you thought about us? I don't want to keep living in the shadows like this." Rick replied with a brief message, "I need more time," but deep down, he felt the pressure mounting. He knew his relationship with Amanda had crossed a dangerous line, yet he didn't know how to extricate himself. Unsatisfied with Rick's response, Amanda decided to take matters into her own hands. She began showing up at Rick's office more frequently, using work as an excuse. Her subtle touches and suggestive glances didn't go unnoticed by some of their colleagues. Before long, rumors about Rick and Amanda's relationship started spreading through the company. Meanwhile, Liz grew increasingly distant from Rick. She tried to maintain a calm exterior, but inside, she was torn apart. She didn't want her children to suffer, but she also couldn't endure the betrayal any longer. One evening, Liz decided it was time to confront Rick directly. When he walked through the door, she was already waiting for him in the living room. The kids were asleep, and the house was completely silent. Rick, we need to talk, she said, her voice calm but firm. Rick was startled by her tone. What's going on? He asked hesitantly. Liz placed the file of photos from the detective on the table. Rick looked down, his face turning pale as he realized what they were. Do you have anything you want to explain? Liz asked, her voice trembling. Rick tried to steady himself. Liz, I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. Never meant for things to go this far? Liz let out a bitter laugh. What about the messages? The dates? That woman? Rick lowered his head, unable to respond. He reached out, trying to touch Liz's hand, but she stepped back. Don't touch me, Rick. You've destroyed everything. Liz turned and walked out of the room, leaving Rick alone in his shame and regret. But for Liz, this was only the beginning of what she knew she would have to face. Liz closed the bedroom door after her tense confrontation with Rick. She sat on the bed, her hands trembling as she held her phone. She had just messaged Sophie, briefly recounting what had happened. Sophie, ever the steadfast friend, responded immediately, Liz, you need to think about yourself and the kids. Don't let yourself drown in pain because of his mistakes. Liz knew Sophie was right. She looked at the photos on the table, irrefutable evidence of Rick's betrayal. But instead of breaking down, Liz felt her heart growing colder. She couldn't afford to let her emotions take over, especially when their two children, Ethan and Sophia, still needed a stable family. The next morning, Liz woke up early. She tried to act normal in front of the kids, preparing breakfast as usual. Rick came downstairs looking exhausted, but Liz didn't spare him a single glance. The tension in the house was palpable, so much so that even the children could sense it. After the kids left for school, Liz turned to face Rick again. We need to talk further, she said firmly. You have 3 options. Either you end things with her immediately, or you leave this house. If you can't decide, I'll make the decision for you. Rick sat down on the chair, his head bowed. Liz, I don't want to lose you and the kids. I'll end things with Amanda. I promise. Liz didn't respond right away. She knew Rick's promises held little weight now, but she decided to give him a chance to make things right. While Liz was trying to keep her family from falling apart, Amanda was not ready to give up on Rick. She believed she was more deserving of Rick than anyone else. To Amanda, Liz was just a worn-out wife who had lost her appeal. She was convinced she could replace Liz in Rick's heart. One morning, Amanda unexpectedly showed up at a corporate event where Liz was also present. The event was organized to honor outstanding leaders, and Rick was one of the honorees. Liz had decided to accompany Rick to maintain the image of a united family. As Liz and Rick entered the hall, Amanda made her entrance in a striking red dress. She walked confidently toward Rick and greeted him with a familiar tone. Hello, boss. You're looking quite dashing today. Liz could sense the tension in Rick's eyes as he quickly responded with a brief reply and turned away. But Amanda wasn't deterred. She continued to find ways to approach Rick throughout the event, ignoring Liz's presence entirely. At that moment, Liz saw Amanda for who she really was, a woman willing to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. After the event, Liz pulled Rick aside. That's her, isn't it? She asked coldly. Rick could only nod. I'm sorry, Liz. I didn't expect her to show up like that. Liz said nothing more. She turned away, her heart heavy with disappointment and frustration. In the days that followed, Liz couldn't stop thinking about her decision. She wanted to protect her family, but she couldn't endure the betrayal any longer. Rick, on the other hand, tried to make amends by coming home earlier, spending more time with the kids, and keeping his distance from Amanda. But Liz could feel that their relationship was no longer the same. One evening, during dinner, Ethan suddenly asked, Mom, why doesn't Dad play with us as much as he used to? Is he really busy? Liz froze, unsure how to respond. She didn't want the children to be affected by what was happening between her and Rick. Dad's just busy with work, sweetheart, but he always loves you both, right? Rick, Rick nodded, forcing a smile. But the look in Liz's eyes said it all. Despite her efforts to shield them, the kids were starting to sense the cracks in the family. Meanwhile, Amanda continued to bombard Rick with messages and calls. She demanded that he make a decision, either be with her, or she would expose everything to the company and the media. The pressure on Rick grew unbearable. He wasn't just afraid of losing his family. He also feared the impact on his career if his affair with Amanda was revealed. Yet, he knew he had to act decisively to hold on to what mattered most. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Rick sat down beside Liz. "I know you don't trust me anymore," he began, "but I want to make things right. I've ended things with Amanda, and I'll do whatever it takes to make amends." Liz remained silent, her eyes gazing into the distance. "Rick, do you know what the hardest part is? It's not forgiveness, it's trusting again. And right now, I'm not sure if I can." Rick took her hand. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, but please, give me a chance to prove myself." Liz looked at him, her emotions in turmoil. She wanted to believe Rick could change, but the images of his betrayal lingered in her mind. She needed time to think and knew she couldn't make a decision in the moment. A few days later, Liz met with a lawyer to understand her rights in case of a divorce. She didn't tell Rick about it, but this decision wasn't meant to threaten him. It was about ensuring she had control over her own future, no matter what happened. Meanwhile, Amanda grew increasingly impatient. She called Rick, threatening to expose their messages and photos if he didn't choose her. Pushed to his breaking point, Rick decided to involve the company's legal department to handle Amanda. The story was reaching its climax, as both Liz and Rick were forced to confront difficult decisions that would determine the future of their family. Amanda, realizing that Rick was gradually pulling away from her, decided to take action. She sent him a provocative message during work hours. "Do you really think you can go back to her and everything will be fine? Don't forget, I hold all your secrets. I won't let you leave so easily." Rick read the message, feeling like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. He realized that Amanda wasn't just a mistake. She was a real threat. At the office, Rick noticed his colleagues starting to pay more attention to him as Amanda persistently found ways to approach him during meetings and joint projects. One afternoon, Amanda barged into Rick's office unannounced. She shut the door behind her, holding a stack of documents. "Rick, we need to talk. Right now." Rick frowned, trying to maintain his composure. "Amanda, I've made myself clear. We need to keep everything strictly professional." Amanda scoffed, stepping closer to his desk. "Professional? Then how do you explain the messages? Those nights we spent together? If you don't want me to bring everything to light, you'd better think carefully." Rick felt cornered. He knew Amanda was using the evidence she had gathered to blackmail him, but he couldn't let this go on. "Amanda, I won't let you destroy my family any further. If you continue, you'll have to face the consequences." Rick's firm words didn't faze Amanda. She smirked, as if she held all the winning cards. Rick returned home that evening with a heavy heart. Liz, who had begun keeping her distance from him, remained silent and cold. After dinner, Liz went upstairs to the bedroom, leaving Rick alone in the living room. He looked around the house, a place that was once filled with laughter and happiness, but now felt weighed down by tension and estrangement. Meanwhile, Amanda didn't stop. She started sending anonymous emails to the company's leadership, insinuating that Rick was involved in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. These rumors quickly spread within the company, creating mounting pressure for Rick. One morning, Rick was called into a meeting with the CEO. "Rick, I've received some concerning information about you and an employee. We'll need to investigate this matter further." Rick felt as though the ground had fallen out from under him. He knew Amanda had crossed every boundary, but he also realized he needed to act quickly if he wanted to save both his career and his family. Rick went to the company's legal department, providing all the information and evidence he had to prove that Amanda was deliberately harassing and defaming him. Meanwhile, Liz continued to maintain her distant demeanor, but she silently observed everything that was unfolding. Liz, after many sleepless nights, decided she could no longer stay on the sidelines. Despite the pain caused by Rick's betrayal, she realized that Amanda was a greater threat, not just to Rick, but to their entire family. One evening, after the children were asleep, Liz sat down for a serious conversation with Rick. Rick, I've thought a lot about this. I can't forgive what you've done, but I won't let Amanda destroy everything we've built. Especially when it comes to Ethan and Sophia. I'll help you confront her, but only for the sake of our children. Rick looked at Liz, overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you, Liz. I know I've hurt you deeply. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. With a calm and determined mindset, Liz began gathering more information about Amanda. She sought out a lawyer specializing in workplace harassment and urged Rick to provide all evidence of Amanda's behavior. Liz also participated in meetings with the company's leadership to clarify the situation and protect Rick's reputation. Meanwhile, Amanda began to lose patience as she realized her efforts were not yielding the results she wanted. She even sent threatening letters directly to Liz. But Liz, embodying the strength of a mother protecting her family, stood firm and unshaken. Finally, the company decided to launch a formal investigation into Amanda's behavior. The anonymous emails, threatening messages, and evidence Rick provided were thoroughly examined. Amanda was summoned to explain her actions but failed to provide any reasonable justification for her behavior. As the investigation concluded, Amanda was forced to leave the company due to her harassment and threats toward a colleague. She lost her job, her reputation, and the social connections she had once cultivated. While Rick managed to keep his position, he received a stern warning for breaching workplace ethics. After everything had settled, Liz sat down with Rick once more. Rick, this wasn't just Amanda's fault. You have to take responsibility for letting things go this far. I'm not sure we can ever go back to what we once had. Rick nodded, his voice filled with emotion. I know, Liz. I'll never stop trying to earn your trust again. Liz didn't respond immediately. She knew she needed time to heal, but she also recognized that Rick was making genuine efforts. For her, this wasn't the start of a renewed relationship with Rick. It was a new beginning for herself. After Amanda was dismissed, Rick returned to work with a heavy heart. Although he had retained his position at the company, he knew his career had taken a significant hit. Colleagues looked at him with suspicion, and rumors about his relationship with Amanda continued to linger within the office. Rick's workdays became suffocating, but he didn't dare complain. He understood this was the price he had to pay for his mistakes. Rick began spending more time at home, trying to make amends with Liz and their 2 children. He took part in their daily activities, from driving them to school to helping Ethan with his homework or reading bedtime stories to Sophia. Liz allowed him to do these things without interference, but she maintained a noticeable distance. One evening, Rick decided to have a heartfelt conversation with Ethan and Sophia. I want to apologize to both of you, he began, his voice low and sincere. Lately, I haven't been around as much as I should have, and that's my fault. But from now on, I'll do better. I promise. Sophia threw her arms around Rick, her innocent smile lighting up her face. Ethan, older and more aware of the situation, simply nodded, but his gaze softened. Rick realized that no matter what, he still had a chance to make things right with his children. While Rick was working to repair his mistakes, Liz began her own journey of self-discovery. She decided to enroll in an interior design course, a passion she had abandoned years ago to focus on her family. The classes brought Liz a fresh sense of purpose and a freedom she hadn't felt in a long time. Each morning, Liz woke up early to prepare breakfast for the kids before driving to her class. She found her life gradually becoming more meaningful, no longer revolving solely around Rick or the pain he had caused. The friends she made in class, the creative projects, and the lively discussions made Liz feel truly alive. One day, while Liz was working on an assignment at a cafe, she received a text from Sophie. Proud of you. Keep going. The Liz I know is a strong, inspiring woman. Liz smiled. She realized she was on the path to rebuilding her life, a life she could truly be proud of. Rick began to notice the changes in Liz. She was no longer the resigned woman who always prioritized him and the family above herself. She was confident, radiant, and seemed far less dependent on him than before. This filled Rick with both admiration and anxiety. He feared he might lose her forever. Rick decided to attend individual therapy sessions to gain a deeper understanding of his mistakes. He wanted to change, not just for Liz, but for himself. Through these sessions, Rick realized that he had allowed work pressure and temptation to overshadow the values of family. Rick also began finding ways to support Liz without interfering with her new life. One day, he surprised her with a notebook on interior design he had found at a bookstore. "I thought you might like this," he said sincerely. Liz thanked him but didn't say much more. Still, Rick knew that small gestures like these held significant meaning. He also worked on mending his relationships with colleagues at the company. Rick took on new projects, became more proactive in helping others, and avoided any ambiguous relationships. He understood that trust and reputation couldn't be restored overnight, but he was willing to be patient and put in the effort. A year after the turmoil, Liz and Rick sat together in the living room, a space that had once borne witness to heated arguments. This time, the atmosphere was calmer. Liz looked at Rick, her voice gentle yet firm. "Rick, I've thought about this a lot. I can't deny that you've worked hard to change, but I've also realized that I need my own space, a life I can fully control." Rick nodded, his eyes reflecting both sadness and respect. "I understand. I'll always be here if you need me, and I'll always be a good father to Ethan and Sophia." Liz smiled, feeling a sense of relief for the first time in months. "Thank you." They decided to separate amicably, sharing the responsibilities of raising their two children. Liz continued pursuing her career in interior design, while Rick focused on rebuilding his career and improving himself. In the following months, Liz began landing larger projects and even opened a small studio to work from. Rick, meanwhile, became a dedicated father, always present at his children's important events. Though no longer husband and wife, Liz and Rick maintained a friendly relationship for the sake of their kids. One afternoon, Liz sat by the window in her studio, gazing out at the street. The sunset painted the sky in vibrant shades of orange. She smiled, her heart filled with hope. She knew she had overcome the darkest days, and a new life awaited her, full of better things to come.